Well, hello Dario.
Hello.
Thank you for coming here at the SAE Institute in Paris.
My pleasure.
And we are very glad to have you here. For the few people who don't know you, can you just tell us who you are and what you do?
Okay. I'm Dario Dendi. I'm a freelance producer, engineer. I've been in the business for about 12, 13 years. I can't remember myself. I'm actually an ex-SAE student. I have a very good memory of that time, actually. It was really good. And it actually gave me the chance of going into... My first big break was being able to work for an established studio. Okay. And they wouldn't even consider having me there if I didn't come from SAE. Because SAE has a reputation, and if you don't come from a college like that, I don't know if they do that now, but then they wouldn't even look at your CV. Okay. So I just showed up my face, and actually when I showed up, apparently they told me later, I was one of the ones that knew my technical knowledge wasn't as advanced as some of the other guys that applied for the same job, but they just liked me because they thought I was funny and I was relaxed, and they thought I would create a good atmosphere in the team, and then they hired me for that reason. So I stayed there for a few years, which worked out really well for me because I had the chance to work with a lot of really big artists and producers, which is where I learned my trade. And then after 4 or 5 years, I went freelance and worked since with a lot of famous and less famous, but still exciting artists. And here I am.
Okay, nice. And can you tell us which artist did you work for or with?
That you may have heard of. I did a lot of work with Stereophonics, right. The Killers. Placebo, Franz Ferdinand, Kaiser Chiefs. But I've also done a lot of work with pop artists as well, which actually has given me a different perspective on the way I work. It's a completely different approach when you work with pop music.
Artists like Sophie
Sugar Babes, Sophie Ellis Bextor. I did a session with Tina Turner as well.
Really?
Yeah.
On what occasion?
She wasn't there, but it was a mixing gig.
Okay.
But the project was Tina Turner. Yeah, and also some less known artists with whom I actually more often than not enjoy more working with, because it's a different approach. They're fresher and they're more open to try and experiment. The thing with when you work with established artists, they always work a little bit towards the expectations that their fans have from them, because they have to deliver something that can't be too, unless, bands like Radiohead, they do exactly the opposite, for example. But generally, there's a fan base to be satisfied out there, and so it's a lot more guided, and in that way, the creativity can be a little bit restrained in that sense. But working with the new artists, upcoming artists, I find it very exciting. Great. And I sometimes develop, if I come across a band that I like, and they perhaps don't have the budget to go into a studio or whatever, I sometimes help them out. Okay, so just to be part of that thing.
You act as a producer in that case?
As an executive producer. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, and you have your own studio?
I've got my own setup at home, from which mainly I mix. I have, as a studio, I have a little bit of a partnership with a studio in Rome, which is where I'm from. So sometimes I fly there with bands and we record some stuff there. Okay. And of course, I use commercial studios in London a lot. But most of the mixing these days I'm actually doing on my own setup, for convenience. And
your own setup is more hardware gear-oriented, or you mix with plugins?
My setup, I mix in the box.
In the box.
I mix in the box, and 10 years ago, would be ashamed to say this, and people will criticize me for it, but actually...
But it changes.
But, the technology has changed. With experience, of course, now I have the confidence and the skill to be able to deliver a high-quality product, mixing that way. So I think it's more It's more to do with how trained your ears are. You know,
Right.
I've done mixes on an M-Box, and people are really happy with it. All the mixes that have been done on SSLs and Neves.
At some point, did you realize, okay, with that technology, I can mix good things in the box?
Initially, it wasn't my choice. It's because the industry has changed so much that, of course, budgets go down. So you need to be a lot more flexible. With even the big bands, you'd be surprised. You know, they're building their own little studios and trying to do as much as they can, just to, you know, so they control the whole process a little more and save some of the money. So it starts as an economical choice, mostly dictated by record labels who weren't willing to spend as much. And then it actually opens up, you know, a world of possibilities, because in my own setup now, I never hand out a mix until I'm happy with it, and I can spend a little bit more on it.
Because you're at home?
Because I'm at home, and I can. I know exactly my room. It's the room I always work in. I treated it a little bit, but nothing major. I really know my room. I know my equipment, plugins, and I'm delivering I mean, who am I to say? But the mixes that I'm most happy with in my career now that I'm doing that.
For you, from your point of view now, what are really the keystones in your career? The moment when you had success, meaning.
It happened at Eden Studios, because I was, of course, you know, working on very important projects. And even, you know, in a studio, as you know, you start as an assistant, and then
Right.
the first opportunity, before you know it, you're engineering. And the next thing, before you know again, you're producing. And I think it was 2004. It's the year I worked on Hot Fuzz with the Killers, and
Yeah.
Employment with Kaiser Chief. And that same year, I did these two very important projects. I wasn't producing them, of course. I was doing a little bit of everything. I was at the stage of my career where I was becoming the house engineer in the studio, so I did a lot of engineering, some programming. And that alone, to be able to associate my name to that project, has brought me a lot of work. And just when people see that I've worked on those two things alone, since then it escalated into a higher reputation, and people, you know, there's the added security. You want to work with this guy because he was, you know, working with the Killers on Hot Fuzz and with Kaiser Chiefs.
And what do the artists you work with or for expect from you when you mix one of the titles, for example? They expect some kind of sonic signature.
I would say when an artist hires somebody like me, they hire you because they know that you have a particular sound, or they know that you work in a certain way. So they don't expect anything other than do what you normally do. So it becomes easier. The more established you are, the easier it becomes.
And how would you describe your sonic signature? What do they
actually, that's a question they often ask, and I cannot find words to describe my own sound. But I think, you know, I'm not a very technical producer. I'm very much one that goes for vibe. So when I listen to my productions next to other people's production, I think, oh man, that sounds really rough. It sounds raw and rough. But I guess that is my style. And I guess that's why people choose to work with me, is because I give priority to the musicality of a song. I don't really go too much into detail of, you know, of course, you know, I consider myself a competent engineer, and I do EQ and compress and all that stuff as well, just as much as other people. But, you know, all that stuff is, for me, it's a means to an end. For me, the important thing is what's musical, and sometimes that ends up sounding a little bit rough, and I guess that is my sound in a way. But I'm happy with it. I don't know. I couldn't do anything different. And I sometimes envy. You know, I listen to other people and say, "Oh man, that sounds so good." You know, why doesn't my stuff sound so good? But then maybe they're thinking the same about my work.
Yeah,
so
probably.
so yeah, I think that's how I would describe my sound.
Okay.
Vibey, musical. Yeah, that's how I like to describe it.
Okay. One last question for you, Dario.
Sure.
You are here to talk with students, and what advice could you give them for a good start in the business? What kind of skills should they practice, should they acquire? Technical, relationship maybe, I don't know. What's the most important?
I think to get into the industry is mostly personality, you know, a good attitude. You have to be ready to sacrifice, but also you have to be willing to smile about all that sacrifice that you're going to do. Because inevitably, it's an industry where it's really hard to progress.
Right.
And attitude is everything. You know, when, you know, most of these students, you know, if they do the traditional career, they might start in a studio as T-boys and all that. And it can be very hard. It can be depressing. The money is terrible when you start. You have to do really long hours, and it's antisocial. But, you know, you have to remember why you went into this thing in the first place. And just have faith that things are going to work out. And never piss off anybody. Be professional, and because the technical stuff we can all learn. That's the easy bit.
Right.
But you know, getting along with people and getting the best out of people, that's the hardest bit. And I think it takes a lot of maturity and sensitivity. And at the end of the day, you just have to be yourself, you know.